What do you know? I have encountered someone who is actually worth my time. YoungBloodFantasy91.
I don't know whether to be honored by this or not. On one hand, you seem to like me for some inexplicable reason. On the other hand, the only reason why you thought I was worth your time was because of your prominent egotism. I mean, you literally cherry-picked me out of plenty of other people who I feel should also be worth your time. But given that your common sense on here is almost non-existent, I'm not surprised you let plenty of legitimate criticism fly over your head like this.
Recently, he constructed a commentary on Rantarek Shorts number 4, The Unimportance of Change. It was detailed, he was soft-spoken, and he had some interesting points to bring up.
Well, thanks for the kind words, Guptill. You know, maybe you're not such a bad person after all. I mean, let's face it, I could look over the whole you not taking criticism and you having obsessions with female anthropomorphic characters bit, if you did not say what's coming afterward.
Now, many of them I disagree with, and that is why I was determined to make this response to him.
The operative word here, determined, as in you were very, very, very desperate to save face and try to refute me, even if you wanted to in the worst possible way. Well, I'm here to say this. Your refutations are pretty mediocre, therefore hinting at how chagrined and upset you were when you realize that your reasoning has been stymied for the billionth time.
Now, instead of doing a commentary on a commentary, what I'll do instead is list the most important arguments and give my thoughts about them. Without any further ado, let's dive in.
Yes, let's dive into your video where you take my statements and insert cutaway scenes so that you can interject with your points and try to counter my arguments. Oh, wait. And I'm going to skip my parts and go directly to Guptill because the original commentary I did on him is still up, and I think you guys are smart enough to go back and review what I said. To avoid confusion, I'll add subtitles to illustrate what Guptill is responding to in each instance.
Okay, people, here's what you need to have hammered into your brains. If you describe someone as pretty and sometimes hot, it does mean attractive, but not in a mounting sexual way.
This argument has been minced to death by other commentators, so all I have to say is this. The dictionary, Guptill, is your best friend.
People, let me tell you about my best friend. She's a warm-hearted...
Actually, so is the thesaurus, because apparently it has an entry for the sexually excited definition of hot. Incontrovertible evidence there, Guptill.
Sorry, Jamin, but your argument falls flat on its face.
He said
and to
face.
add to that, by your own logic, it seems to me that if anybody describes anything as hot, including a stylish backpack or a pen, people are going to cast horrified looks on them and think, "Dear God, he wants to do that backpack! Somebody call security!"
Wow, Guptill, the histrionics in your statement were astounding. And that is a poor interpretation about how people think. Most people are familiar with the word hot and use it in the proper context, such as when they say that backpack is hot, it means it's in vogue. The thesaurus strikes again. So it seems to me, Guptill, that you are not familiar with the word hot or its connotations, and that to me is pretty pathetic.
Besides, as long as the anthropomorphic character looks humanoid and is fictional, why does it matter? Quit acting like they're real.
I appreciate your indignant tone, insane man, but that's the reason why people are saying you are a sonic female obsessed freakazoid, because you labeled certain characteristics of these characters as hot when we all know that they are fake characters created by a team of artists and animators, and that hints at the idea that you are sexually turned on by these characters. Either you're flinging words around not knowing what they mean, or you're making the characters even more real than you erroneously believe we're doing. So evidently, you're projecting your anger on us, and that is a Freudian defense mechanism that hints at denial.
Youngblood, there is a difference between nitpicking and majorly criticizing something. Throughout the whole presentation, I have been criticizing major stuff.
What major stuff do you mean? The Tropicana logo changing? The Nike logo losing the word Nike when everyone damn well knows that the swoosh logo is just as easily recognized? I find that nitpicking because it appears to be an inconvenience only to you, as a person. Plenty of other people can get by with these changes, unless if they were just as Village Green Preservation Society as you, or they simply don't pay attention. And either way, that's an error on their part and the fault lies with them, not the company who changed the logo.
Nitpicking, on the other hand, is arguing about a change that is so tiny, it wouldn't make any sense to criticize it.
But that's exactly what you did when you brought up the Mountain Dew logo's changes. But I will get to how he reacts to that in a minute. And let me just say, it's priceless.
Take, for example, the new Nintendo seal. It still has the same font and oval, but it's white. It used to be red and nothing else. If someone complained about that, that would be the proper definition of nitpicking. A major revision would be taking the words orange juice, changing them to OJ, and removing the picture of the orange or oranges.
First of all, the Nintendo example you presented was pretty much what you did when you criticized the Dunkin' Donuts sign in the building. The Dunkin' Donuts font remained the same, the general design remained the same, but they included more of an orange background in their logo, which is what you are saying that the Nintendo seal did. Change color and nothing else. Therefore, what you said was flawed. And the OJ example was flawed too, because the information that you kept in the illustration is enough to give people the idea that, hey, not from concentrate, OJ, it has to be orange juice. Honestly, it's as if you think the average Joe is the densest person on the planet with no reasoning skills whatsoever. Give people some slack.
Here's what you don't understand. If you take the design of a product and then warp it around, you're not going to identify it as quickly as you could before. Heck, some people might not notice it at all.
And the discrepancy that you propose in terms of identification time must be minimal at best because there hasn't been any news about logo confusion or people getting angry because a logo on a product change. It may take some more time to get used to the new design, but I don't think people are going to say, whoop, the text has been moved slightly to the left, the product is now a mystery to me. Again, assuming people are completely addle-brained speaks volumes about your reasoning abilities.
If you took a closer look at the difference between the old and new Tropicana cartons, the name of the brand is right where it needs to be on the old one, but on the second one, the words 100% orange stands out way more than the name of the brand turned sideways.
Yes, the 100% orange is emphasized, but the Tropicana name is still there. Sure, it's turned 90 degrees. Sure, it's a bit different, but that doesn't make the product alien to anybody. It just means the product design was altered. Honestly, if you can't see that the label is there, then you are either blind, which is something you cannot help, or you're the most unobservant person on the face of the earth, which seeps into Uncanny Valley and renders your argument inconceivable, Guptill.
Thankfully, however, the designers realized the problem and transfigured it back to what it should look like. In the product world, you are going to need to judge it by the cover anyway.
First of all, why do you think Tropicana should look like the way you presented it here? Because you are a self-centered tool? That's the only way to describe why you labeled the design as such, because it conformed to your preferences. And let me check, there are almost 7 billion other people in this world who lead completely independent lives from you, and by association have different levels of reasoning. And of course, some of them are going to judge the product, but not to the point where it will be a black and white situation where if the logo is slightly changed, they will reject the product because the label is scrunched to one side. That's entirely superficial, and again, that idea also lives in Uncanny Valley with your belief that everyone is a dunderhead.
This is the only argument that I agree with. The reason I compared those two pictures together is because I thought that MTN would perplex some persons. Little did I know, I was being a bit of an idiot.
It takes a strong man to admit your mistakes, but you completely contradicted the premise in the video. You said in the beginning, I am going to contradict all of his arguments. I am determined to do this. Now suddenly you feel one of my arguments is valid. Where's the determination, Guptill? Did it vanish alongside your rationales for lambasting slight logo changes on the grounds of doing this to satisfy your self-serving bias on the issue?
True, Nike is widely recognized by millions of individuals, yet when you don't have the name on the trademark, sooner or later, someone might ask what the name of it is.
And like I said in my original commentary, there's something called the internet where you can look up the swoosh logo and get an answer in, this time, 0.14 seconds. And Wikipedia even attests to it being the most recognizable logo brands in the world. So there is a very slim chance that people are going to question what swoosh means, since again, it all falls back on commercialism and its influence on the human psyche.
And quite frankly, I think the populace hate asking that type of question. Also, a couple of other corporations have a design similar to the Nike swoosh, such as Brooks,
which looks like a blue deformed 7 rather than a swoosh, and which only has one tapered end while the swoosh logo has two.
Saucony,
which looks like a collapsed S with bullet holes, and the top seems to be pushed down, thus not making it a swoosh-shaped or check-shaped.
And Mizuno,
which looks like the swoosh logo if the tapered edges were shaved off, and then the whole design was placed on a pedestal that seemed to have merged with the shaved swoosh. In all three instances, I have observed recognizable qualitative differences between the Nike logo and the three examples presented here, and I'm sure other people can do the same. But since you underestimate human intelligence, Guptill, apparently that's not possible, is it?
In other words, Youngblood, your argument is kind of irrelevant.
Well, so is yours, but you don't see me gloating about it.
If you look at some of the other running shoes insignias, they're all conveniently labeled with the name of the product right there. Nike doesn't retain that trait, which it should have.
First of all, Nike is one of the most well-known brands in the world. The other logos are recognizable but not as universal as Nike, and besides, the logos that each brand has here, such as New Balance, can actually be used independent of the logo because what else does NB stand for? Nastily bad? Oh wait, that's you. But let's drop the levity for a second. Do you honestly think that Nike is supposed to have a design that conforms to your self-serving bias? Nike is not going to consult you on logo changes, Guptill, and neither will New Balance or Basics when they decide to change their logos. So again, your egotism destroys your argument. I really hope you understand this.
Well, see how the name is scrunched in between the word performance and the nutrition facts? Not to mention it's gray, like the other words. It actually seems to blend in.
First of all, it's not like the word Gatorade is the same shade of gray as the rest of the background, so you are exaggerating. I can clearly see the word Gatorade here, and let's not forget, the Gatorade logo has the classic Thunderbolt, ever since the product's inception. And what other energy drink can you think of that starts with the letter G that has been around for a while? For that matter, what other sports drinks can you think of that starts with the letter G? Riddle me that, Guptill.
Believe it or not, my stepdad had trouble finding Gatorade drinks. I'm dead serious.
Either your stepdad is not that observant and cannot locate the product label, or he found it after some time. Eventually he found the product, right? So what does that prove? That means that he had to have found the logo eventually and realized that it was Gatorade. And I'm sure that since you have a tendency to exaggerate everything, it was only a couple of seconds for him to figure out it was Gatorade. Look, the way you use hyperbole in almost every sentence you spurt out makes me disinclined to take your examples at face value. So either way, what you said was immaterial to the discussion.
Well, it very well seems that way now.
So you feel that corporations are pandering to those who wish for things to never change? Because that is what I said there. If that were the case, Gatorade and Nike would be on their knees to hear what magical wisdom you have on their logo designs, and they would be forever in your debt. I feel that there was a lack of understanding there, Guptill, but since your video is riddled with this, I am not surprised.
Probably, but you should keep in mind that Smith wasn't a few centuries ahead of his time. The drawback with his Wealth of Nations inquiry is that it doesn't take into account scheming unnecessarily. Therefore, much industry is ignoring his principles.
Okay, that argument would be valid if you talked about corporations and the actions of the major players of the corporation. However, we're not talking about the ethics of corporate action, we're talking about logos. So switching the scope of the discussion, Guptill, is an indirect cop-out on your part.
Preceding ads didn't have a theme almost identical to What's G, Youngblood. The ads usually involved running, throwing balls, striking pucks, and so on.
Well, hey, it's not my problem if the commercial features athletes that endorse the beverage. That might as well be considered a sports beverage. That is a sports beverage starting with the letter G. That has been around for a long time. Hey, look at me, I'm using my common sense and attention to detail to figure this out. The themes may be slightly different, but I said that they were similar, not identical, in the sense that they did use athletes. Besides, the commercial did not last that long anyway, so either way, if it did confuse some people, the problem was resolved.
It also exhibited the beverage usually by way of somebody washing it down and developing colorful sweat. What's G, on the other hand, just features a long row of stationary athletes and a stylish letter G at the end. If the promoter does not display the object that describes the product, confusion is going to occur even if you don't expect it to.
If you employed common sense, much like how I did, you would be able to figure it out easily. There are athletes, there is a G, there is a Thunderbolt. What more do you want? An ad saying, "This is Gatorade, now buy it." I don't know about you, but I'm sure people would not be stupid enough to think of that as a legitimate ad for the product. Besides, this is not the first time that certain ads were being indirect with the presentation of their product. You're probably confusing Gatorade's former brand of advertising with false advertising, when we all know full well that it cannot be the case, given that I use my common sense. Unfortunately, you seem to lack it.
True, the Warner Brothers and Screen Gems alterations were pretty stupid, but at least they had the courtesy to place the business name along with the insignia.
Chermayeff and Geismar, this is Guptill89. Guptill89, Chermayeff and Geismar. This company designs logos that are so well known that one could see the logo independent of the business name and people would be confident what product or company the logo represents. Because you see, Guptill, people are able to associate pictures with products, and sometimes the business name is not always needed unless you want to split hairs, which you do. Here are some examples of certain logos Chermayeff and Geismar designed.
Also, little do you know, you were actually adding to my argument. I complained about Chrysler because while some can be familiar with the manufacturer, they can still get bewildered, especially if they went to an old-fashioned car show, or if they're on the road and spot a vehicle with any one of these symbols on it, because they can forget what trademarks the corporation had.
This is literally the only part of the video where I tilted my head back and was like, "Dear God, Guptill made a solid point!" But see, here's the problem. You're assuming that any average Joe is going to drive around and see all of these Chrysler symbols. We damn well know it's not the case, given that you don't see Joe Public driving around a 1935 Chrysler Airstream or a 1976 Chrysler Galant. You may see them, but they are not usually seen. Again, you are magnifying possibilities that usually do not occur in everyday life. Therefore, the confusion factor is not going to be as overwhelming as you claim.
Yes, I am, because as long as it says Pepsi on the can, bottle, or other object, nothing is wrong.
I cannot emphasize enough how desperately your common sense needs bolstering. Just like I said when I talked about Chermayeff and Geismar, the logo could be as distinctive as the business name and therefore can exist independent of the business name itself. What, you need everything spelled out for you? I suppose we could construct a street called Guptill Road and every business on that road must be completely specifically named. In the real world, things don't work the way you think they should.
The long line of modifications is a perfect example of consistency, something a few other organizations like Nike and Gatorade lack.
My God, the Nike logo is the epitome of consistency. It has not changed once. Ever. Yes, the business name was removed at some point, but the logo never changed. Based on that flawed logic, there's a lack of consistency for the logo histories of Shell, Kentucky Fried Chicken, NBC, Apple, Texaco, Chevrolet, General Electric, McDonald's, Buick, Prudential, Volkswagen, Mercedes. Do I really need to continue here?
Refer to what I said earlier about the Mountain Dew issue since I don't want to recapitulate.
And your argument comes crashing to the ground. So everything you said the past 5 minutes were irrelevant. Wow, Guptill, admitting that I was right really does a number on your reasoning, huh?
To point out actual problems with the economy that most folks take for granted?
So you're substituting natural logo design changes with problems with the economy? I don't see how they're interchangeable. Let's think about it for a moment. Why is our economy declining? Oh, well, it can't be the government spending too much, or the housing market collapsing, or subprime mortgages being handed out like candy to too many people, or the world markets also trying to bail out bankrupt countries. Nah, it all comes down to what the Nike logo looked like in 2008 as opposed to 1995. Brilliant, Guptill. Simply brilliant.
If an establishment only gets redecorated, it shouldn't be considered progress. The real definition of progress would be expanding the size of the structure or putting up an entirely different premise altogether.
Well, Guptill, I got news for you. When it comes to redecoration, there is always the aspect of maintenance to take into consideration. A Dunkin' Donuts that has been around for many years without any changes made to it will stick out like a sore thumb down the road when people and stores around it will change too. So, to account for this, people will perform redecoration to not only make the store look good, but also to account for any maintenance problems it may have. So, yes, it is progress if the building has been updated to keep up to code and appearance.
Take this for instance. The old McDonald's properties in New England had an appearance that looked like a 3D interpretation of the original Pizza Hut seal. Now, the buildings are rectangular cubes with bricks and stone. Despite the fact that it slightly looks like a car dealership, it's an appropriate redesign.
But that's redecoration, Guptill. You said redecoration to an extent is useless. And I'm sure that maintenance was employed when redecorating that McDonald's anyways, so I don't think it isn't too much of an appropriate redesign as much as it was necessary for it to an extent.
Also, they added more parking spaces. On the other hand, going from this to this doesn't work.
And yet you don't seem to outline why this new design doesn't work. Sad, because it proves my point. You just don't like the look of the design, therefore you think it is useless. I swear, the more you talk, the more I'm inclined to believe that you're just doing this based on your own bias.
And besides, as long as the sign has the words Dunkin' Donuts on it, individuals are going to order the treats anyway.
So you shouldn't care about redecorations if the store premise remains the same and if they are still vending the same donutty comestibles and the same coffee. All you are caring about is the appearance of the store. Honestly, you are one superficial son of a bitch.
Oh, please. If I didn't possess the knowledge exemplified in the presentation, the bad U.S. economy could get worse.
Okay, Milton Friedman, tell me how the economy is hanging in the balance when you got Prudential changing its logo or Apple changing its logo. Tell me, how is our GDP going to look, Mr. Paul Krugman, when Lay suddenly underlines its logos or changes the font to Comic Sans? I swear, this connection you're making between logos and the economy is almost too inextricable. Just restrict this to consumerism, not concepts involving debt that isn't related to that.
A lot of officials are greedy and are spending thousands of dollars to do things that inflame the financial crisis, such as this.
And of course, John Maynard Keynes over here is going to describe the perfect example of how our economy works and then mislabel it as unnecessary. Let's see his brilliance in action.
In Somersworth, New Hampshire, there used to be a medium group of houses in one particular area. Citizens lived in that area.
Nah, really? The citizens lived in houses? I thought that in residential areas, people lived in the CVS pharmacy. Oh, how idiotic of me.
There was also a furniture store as well. But one day, all those buildings were torn down just to construct a CVS pharmacy. If you thought demolishing the houses was bad enough, across from the pharmacy is another pharmacy owned by Rite Aid. Brilliant. Simply brilliant.
And that is the core of capitalism right there, Guptill. Capitalism incorporates the idea of competitive markets in which two or more parties act independently to secure the business of a third party by offering the most favorable items or terms. What are the two parties? CVS and Rite Aid. The third party? People. And that, Guptill, is how our economy works. And since you do not understand the mechanics of our whole economy, I think all of your efforts to try to save it from logo changes and store maintenance is in vain.
What they should have done was nothing. But if they kept the plans to put up a CVS pharmacy, all they would need to do is set it inside the place where Rite Aid was if that particular store went out of business, and just keep the homes and furniture store. That would be an example of a healthy economy.
No, that's an example of arresting the financial opportunities the CVS could gain by moving in on prime territory and rendering its business for others while making money for themselves and generating convenience for the consumers. There could be a number of reasons why the CVS moved in. The town needed more money, the neighborhood was dilapidated, the Rite Aid was still in business, the furniture store called it quits. You're not taking into account other contributing factors to this that would force the CVS in the position that it was in. The economy isn't being heartless to people. The economy is just trying to sustain the expenses of our country. So, yes, Adam Smith would be angry at you for not understanding the idea of competitive markets. Idiot.
Bad news. You misunderstood. Again, refer to what I said about that stuff earlier because I don't want to reiterate it.
Well, that's a pure cop-out there, Guptill. I believe my argument is sound because you provided the template for why the store needs to change. To catch up with the times, in case the store needs maintenance, and to catch a person's eye, to make redesigns that ultimately reflect the way the company wants to present itself. I fail to see where I misunderstood there. Perhaps you are misunderstanding me.
Well, guess what? Gatorade, Nike, and Chrysler have been part of the American culture for quite a lot of years, and their symbols didn't have to go through such baffling alterations throughout the course of time.
Baffling alterations? Again, with your innate ability to be hyperbolic in any situation. Let me reword what I said there, as I may have been ambiguous. The logos here, again designed by our old friends Chermayeff and Geismar, are logos that have a simplistic and iconic format. Therefore, lots of them retain the same design throughout their existence. But not all logos are that iconic. Some of them change, like Chrysler and Gatorade. But again, you're not going to see every single variation of the Chrysler logo, and the Gatorade label can be identified if you look at the damn bottles. And do I really need to mention how Nike is recognized by almost all the whole world again? All you are doing is overinflating certain parts of your opinions to make it appear you have points when they are simply outcroppings of your insufferable self-serving bias. That, a good argument, does not make. Also this. Censorship protects ignorance, not innocence.
The problem is, most workers aren't that smart. Also, it's actually bad marketing to confuse customers.
Precisely. if you were dealing with false advertising. And none of these logo changes are indicative of false advertising. People are not going to slip into a fit of confusion if they see logos changing, because if they can see the product label, the problem is not going to affect them. You think everyone is so oversensitive to change, much how you are. Newsflash, that's wrong.
Well, that's it. 12 arguments, all of which I disagree with. That is a lot.
No, you totally conceded to one of my arguments, so it's 11, but that's assuming that your arguments were strong. All of your arguments were either a collection of unwarranted complaints concerning logos or misinterpretations about our economy. That was all they were.
So, Youngblood, as well as everybody else, I hope you've comprehended this long reply and will take into account strategies to help build an actual, robust economy.
Sure thing, Guptill. I'll write to every major corporation and tell them to never change their logos again. I'm sure consumers will not get bored with corporations as they are not finding ways to advertise their product as a result of their firing all of their advertising departments, thus severing their relationship with the general public, thus distancing themselves from consumerism, thus destroying them from the inside out. Sure thing, Vilfredo Pareto.
Thanks for watching, and have a great day.
And that's the way it is. Guptill, if you were ever appointed to an economic position, assuming if fate wanted to toy with your life, I'd like to see how you would fare if you employed your principles in action. For that matter, I'd like to see you work at Chermayeff and Geismar or even McCann Erickson and see how far you would go there. Because honestly, they are more focused on creativity and figuring out ways to reel people into their other people's businesses, rather than thinking about how long a logo should last for each business. Ultimately, Guptill, you're self-centered. You misinterpret information, you don't understand our economy, and you are in no position to debate if you cannot think of solid counter-arguments. And thus endeth my solemn journey into the world of the never-changing doldrums that is Guptill's mind.